so that we can understand a little better, more clearly, what the general process of learning and in general getting into Jewish life. The basic question or problem, for lack of a better word, that I want to attend to is a sense of discouragement that we feel occasionally when we do what we are asked to do. We learn, we daven, or whatever it is. As a matter of fact, this extends itself into any activity of life. A person goes to work. Occasionally, a person asks himself, what is this all about? What am I accomplishing? In the worldly perspective, a person feels accomplished when he can succeed in competition with others. Then this is where the whole idea of competition comes in. If he gets recognition, and he feels good about himself, he gets recognition. But even in recognition, this is Emerson, what the Rebbe calls Koved Shel Hevel, empty honor. But even there, it is empty in its very essence. Or Koved Hamduma, the Rebbe called it. Hamduma, the imaginary Koved. Koved Hamduma, the imaginary Koved, goes to an extent where a person may even know that it's Meduma, and yet he is satisfied with it. For instance, the Rebbe has given him resources, given him money, and he gives money to a moiset, and to an institution, and the institution honors him, puts him up on the head table, and says all kinds of different praises about this person. This person doesn't necessarily begin to understand and appreciate what the greatness of this institution is. He doesn't appreciate what's happening there. He doesn't really have an understanding or a value to the activities of the institution. But this institution is a well-known institution, and it's putting him on the high chair, on the throne, and it makes him feel good. So this is literally an imaginary honor, and he is satisfied with it. But how long can a person live on imaginary honor? But this is how the world operates. There is a saying, and we don't have it in our nusach, but all in the other nischois, in the other versions, and in tefillah, in davening, the Poilashe and in Nusach Ashkenaz, there is a tefillah that they say before Birchas HaChodesh, the Shabbos Levorchim. So we start from Misha Osem Nisim. And other Nuschois say a holy Hirotzim before that. And in that Hirotzim they say a whole prayer that the Rebbe should give us good, healthy life and all the blessing and so forth. And among the things that they say, that it says in that tefillah, in that prayer, is that we should have chayim shel oisher v'choved, life of wealth and koved and honor. So everybody asks, what kind of prayer is it? Maybe you ask for wealth, you understand, but to pray for koved doesn't make any. It seems a little bit childish to ask for koved. So there is a kind of a perhaps a joking explanation of this, but it hits to the truth a little bit, that we should have a life of wealth, and that the wealthy people should appreciate koved. That the Oisha should appreciate koved, because if the Oisha appreciates koved, then he will maintain the institutions. If he doesn't appreciate koved, so he's going to hoard his wealth, and he's not going to give it to use it to proper institutions. So this is just the way the world goes around. But when it comes to real things, it comes to yeshiva, it comes to learning, then that extraneous hoopla doesn't exist. Then you have to have real sense of what you're doing. And often one feels that he kind of loses it. He is struggling, especially when he is coming at a, so to speak, in an advanced, let's say in an advanced stage of life, not advanced but advanced in terms of educationally. By the age one is 20, by world standards, he is supposed to be at a certain level of knowledge and understanding and learning. And here he comes in and starts learning from a much primitive state. He starts learning Aleph, Ivra, basic Chumash, and so forth. So he's struggling with a level of learning that is below his intellectual level. Intellectually, he can really go and understand much more profound and involved and intricate thoughts, and here he's involved in simple things, and that could be very discouraging. And even further down, when one begins to learn Chumash and Rashi and Gemara and even Tosfos and Chassidus perhaps one can relate to more on a personal level. But even Chassidus in certain things are very deep and kind of beyond a personal message. But in Gemara for sure, he is learning about inyanim that are impractical. It's not training him for any particular trade, for anything that he will be able to go out and go and use and do. And he kind of feels at a loss. What, in fact, am I doing? I'm learning a theoretical thing. Maybe theoretically it's true, but where is it in my world? How does it belong here, where I am? How do I belong there? We have seen from our discussion of last week that there are in fact three distinct ways that the world can be perceived. And we human beings, Yidden, actually incorporate all of these three. We can see the world, lahavdul, through the eyes of an animal, where we see that which is corporeal, that which can be forced upon us and undeniably there because it's physical. And therefore we can measure it on the physical level. How much weight is it? How strong is it? How much does it cost? And so forth. We can see the world from a perception, from a human perception, that an animal havdil has no perception of this at all. What is the human value of certain things? Like we described last week briefly. And then we can perceive the world from a much higher level, which is called the godly perception. We incorporate all three. We have the capacity to see the world at all three levels. And I want to discuss these three modes, these three levels, these three modes of perception, how this reflects itself in practice. And then we will be able to utilize this, to bring this down to our lives, and to develop an approach that will be always encouraging and giving us the impetus to go on and develop and grow and succeed. We've explained then that the animal does not perceive, does not relate to a big world, does not see a big world. The animal sees just what is in its way, what is directly related to it. Is this edible or is this not edible? If it's edible, I want it. If it's not edible, then I don't care about it. What its value is beyond that is totally immaterial, and I can't relate to it. The animal does not perceive that there is beauty in the world, there is grandness, that there is, the animal could not appreciate a beautiful sky, for instance, that is so elevating to a person. As a matter of fact, the halacha is that a shul is supposed to have windows so they could see the sky. An animal has no appreciation of that whatsoever. And you know something? If we would study the world with our animal level of perception, we would also not appreciate it. Because if we study the world from a physical perception and say, what constitutes that beautiful color and that beautiful view of this? It's nothing. It's just space. There's nothing to it. This is a table. This is a concrete thing. This is just open space. It's just an image. It's not real. It doesn't exist in the corporeal world. So if we want to stoop and perceive things like an animal, we very easily can. And we can make a very strong argument for it. It does not have any weight. It does not have any concrete effect. It's just your perception. Yet, as a human being, it makes all the difference to a human being, the fact that he can perceive a beautiful world. It gives him a totally different attitude. It changes his mood completely. and he relates to anything that he does totally differently. Is this real or is this imaginary? It is very real. Not only is it real, it is much more real than the corporal perception of the animal. The animal is blind to what is going on around it. It sees things in a very narrow and small way. It's blind to the real reality. I will give you an illustration of this, maybe a little deviation from the thought process, but you'll understand this point quite clearly. You step into this room and you observe tables and chairs and people sitting around. You do not need to feel and measure things in order to understand what's going on. You come into this room, you immediately perceive that something is going on. This is a shul, this is a yeshiva, and people are pursuing a very profound human activity. By first glance, you see it right away. What do you notice when you come in? Tables and chairs and people. The minute you enter, you don't notice tables, you don't notice chairs, you notice people. You notice an activity. You notice something going on that is on a high human level. Lahavdi, what does an animal perceive when it comes in? It sees obstacles in its way. It wants to walk this way and there's a chair in the middle. What is it doing in my way? There's a table in the middle. What is going on is totally oblivious to it. This, in fact, gives us an understanding of the difference between darkness and light. And when we say that the human being can be in the dark, and when he's in dark, he sees that which an animal sees, this illustrates it perfectly. Because when you come into this room and it's pitch dark, you see nothing. By feeling your way around, you can ultimately identify every object in the room. You feel your way around, you see, oh, here there is this, here there is this, there's this chair, there's a table, there's this person. You can feel your way around and eventually identify every detail in the room. When you come in and it's light, so you see all the very same details, but of course you see them instantaneously. You don't have to feel your way around. But the real difference between this perception and that, in light and in darkness, is not that in light it is instant, and in darkness it takes time. But rather that which you perceive in light, you will never get to know in darkness. Because in darkness you perceive only the objects, and in light you perceive the purpose of these objects. What is this all about? Why is it there for? In dark, every chair and every table, you know that it's there because, how do you find out that it's there? Because the table is in your way. So you know there's an object there. Because you can't go through it. You don't know its purpose. It doesn't belong there. It happens to be there, so you know it's there. How do you know it's there? Because it's in your way. It stops your walk. Whereas in light, you perceive not the presence of the table, you perceive its purpose. And you say, it really belongs here. It is a real thing. It's not just there to take up room for storage. It's there because it belongs there, because this whole room has an overall meaning and purpose. This is how a human being perceives things. Asking yourself the question, which perception is more correct? The dark perception, which is concrete and undeniable there, it's physical, it's corporal, or the human perception, the light perception, that doesn't even pay attention to the physical, doesn't even notice it. Ask him how many tables were there. Oh, I didn't count them. What do you mean you didn't count them? You were in this room. You observed it. That wasn't thing whatever you observed. I didn't pay attention to that. That had no meaning to me. I wanted to see what this room is about. And I can tell you what's about. Who is right? What is more correct? What is more true perception? What is really happening here? The presence of tables and chairs and people, or the fact that this is a medrash and there is learning going on. This will introduce and help us to understand what each individual, every one of us as individuals, are actually doing and what our lives represent. To illustrate this on an individual basis, again, from something that we can relate to and understand. A soldier enlists in the army, and he gets his training. Everybody knows that basic training, the boot camp, is very rigorous and very trying. And he suffers the 6 months of the boot camp, during which time he is trained to completely disregard his personal preferences. That's what the training is all about. You get up a moment's notice. You go without sleep beyond the number of hours that is normal, that you are used to. You do physical labor beyond that which you ever dreamt of. It's not that just the physical, that you become physically fit. Your whole mindset, your whole attitude has to change. You have to be able to respond to a command instantaneously without question. You become a soldier. Now, I want to take a contrast between two soldiers going through this rigorous training. One came into the army because he was wild. He couldn't get hold of himself. He was getting into all kinds of troubles. He was floating around, he had no purpose. And somebody advised him correctly that if he goes into the army, it will train him to have self-discipline. He will be disciplined so that he'll be forced into this discipline. And then as a result of that, he will be able to contain his life and to get hold of himself. The other enlisted in the army because he wanted to serve his country. and he also went through the same training. If we contrast these two people, both their mindset, their attitude, and what they have accomplished after the training and where they stood before the training. After the training, the former, the first instance, the discipline seeker, what does he have? He has now accomplished, and perhaps correctly, he accomplished in real terms to a certain extent, the ability to self-contain and to follow a disciplined path. Okay, I am now capable I'm now capable of living like a soldier. What next? Where does this bring me? I have to start looking, okay, what am I going to do with that new skill? I'm still myself. I'm still an isolated individual, just myself, except now I have the skill. I'm able to pursue a life. I'm able to walk on a straight line. Okay, where does the line lead me? That's a totally different thing. It's a new... He's still back into the emptiness where he came from. He came from emptiness, and he's back into emptiness. Except now he has the skill of self-discipline. And if he doesn't get caught someplace quickly, then very quickly it's going to unravel. He's going to go back to his purposeless life. Taking the other one, who enlisted because he wanted to serve his country. So after his training, what is he now? Now I'm proud to be a soldier in the U.S. Army. Now I'm where I wanted to be. If we think a little deeper into this, we realize that he came into the U.S. Army to begin with because he was a U.S. citizen, because he belonged in the U.S. in the first place. That's where he started. And now he developed further in a practical way that he's actually serving in that serving in that unit, in that entity. It's nothing new. Not that he's now part of the U.S. He was part of the U.S. before. Because he was part of the U.S. before, that's why he went through this rigor, and he now became part of that service. The same thing, in a much more profound way, applies to an individual Aid. Every individual of us. We can view our presence in the yeshiva as a means to contain myself and to tell myself that I can accomplish something that has to do with me as an individual. But this is not the real reason we are here. The real reason we are here is because we are Eden. And we are Eden, we are Jews before we came here. And before we even started this process. We were full-fledged Eden. And what happens here? What happens here is that we get to recognize what it means to be a Yid. And we know how to live as such. And we understand what it is about. So that every moment of our learning, every moment of our occupation, of our training, so to speak, we are bringing out more and more this cognizance, what it is that we really are even before we came. What it is to be a Yid. This quality is not measured, as I said before, is not measurable from a behemoth perspective. A behemoth cannot possibly. In other words, if we look at things from a worldly perspective, there's no way we can measure it. But from a human perspective, from a human view of what is going on in the world, it has every meaning. As I mentioned before, what is the difference between the way a behemoth perceives the world, and the way a human being perceives the world? A behemoth perceives the world as a whole bunch of little things. A human being perceives the world as one great and beautiful entity. And a Yid, over on top of that, perceives the world as an emanation, as a godly creation. When he enters into this service, he enters into this effort of learning the Torah, of learning Yiddishkeit. His effort is to discover and to understand what that perception is. So that every word that he is learning, he knows that this, just like this soldier in training, he knows that this, every word is representative of the whole truth. As a matter of fact, there's a halacha. The Gemara says, "Ha'oisek b'mitzvah potur min ha'mitzvah." When one is involved in doing one mitzvah, he is then exempt from doing any other mitzvah. It isn't merely that since he's involved in doing a mitzvah, he can't do two things at a time. He really should be doing, but he can't do it, therefore he misses out. Doesn't miss anything out. He is in fact exempt, he's potur from doing any other mitzvah. Because every mitzvah is representative of the entire truth. Coming back, practically speaking, when one learns a piece of Gemara, the first stage of his learning the Gemara is he has got to learn the words, the actual words. This is, so to speak, at the physical level. This is the basic level. Then he has to learn how the words fit into a sentence, how to put them together. This is slightly above, but it's still on the logical level. And as we said the other day, logical level is also still a simple worldly, or even, so to speak, a behemoth level of understanding. You put things in line. But then he goes in and starts understanding what is the message. What is the svara? What does it say? There, he has to begin to employ his completely different perception and different resource. The value of what he is learning at that point is that it gives him an insight what is the godly view of this particular question. It is no longer a physical thing. It is no longer simple logic. It opens his mind to be able to perceive real concepts. Human concepts and even higher than human concepts. And that's what it's about. We, as human beings, and above that, as Yidden, perceive ourselves not as isolated individuals. We perceive ourselves as members in the entire universe. And each individual of us is representative of this entirety. And we are participants in this activity. Just as in the smaller scale, the illustration of this soldier who is representative of the American citizenship. We are representatives of the entire truth. The Rebishter made the world, he made the whole world, and he made us. He made us not as separate entities, he made us as part of the world. And each one of us has that quality, that representation. This, what? One second. This is the approach. This is the approach. This is the step in that brings us to Torah. It is not merely to develop myself, develop my disciplinary skills. It is to help me define and understand what does it mean that I'm a Yid. I am a Yid before I came here. What does it mean I'm a Yid before I was part of the Jewish nation? Because I'm part of the Jewish nation. This is why I'm coming here, and I want to develop that perception. I'm not creating a new self. I am developing skills so that I have skills now, and now what? I'm developing my place in the Jewish nation so that when I reached a certain stage, what does that mean? Now I have a better perception of what a Yid is. And I'm part of it, and I know exactly what I need to do, where to go right. As a final message, perhaps, which I thought was practically important, one of the principles of success in yeshiva, in any yeshiva, is keeping a rigorous seder. To stick to the order, to the seder of the yeshiva. to get up on time, to daven when the yeshiva davens, to eat when the yeshiva eats, to learn when the yeshiva learns, and to go to sleep when the yeshiva sleeps. The rigor of Seder. Here too, as adults, one would say, well, how can somebody tell me when to go to sleep, when to get up? What does it mean? I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. When I'm supposed to go to sleep, when I'm supposed to get up, when I'm supposed to eat. I do things when I want. It's not a rebellion, but I'm an adult. I can tell myself when the right time is to do things. What to learn, what I need to learn, what I want to learn. All of these things are things which an adult says I can choose for myself. And in response to this, each one we have to reflect on the fact that a yeshiva, just as we spoke about before, there is the overall union that's going on. It's not just tables and chairs. A yeshiva, especially this yeshiva, the Lubavitcher yeshiva, is not merely a get-together of people who decided, okay, we're going to make a yeshiva. A yeshiva is connected to Rebbe, connected to all the Rebbe's yeshivas. It is not just an opportunity, a place like Havdalah University, you go in, or a library, you go in and study because there are books in there. It has a special connection to the source, to the real source of bracha. And every moment in the yeshiva represents that connection. So that if one follows the Seder of the yeshiva in every respect, in going to sleep and in getting up, simple things, and in simple things or ruchnistic things, all that is connecting him. He is thereby, this is representative of the whole concept of there being a yeshiva, a place to learn, of the whole concept of there being a Torah in the world. Because Torah also requires order. Torah cannot be picked up from the air. It has to be picked up from a book. And it has to be learned in a certain order and with a certain discipline. So therefore this discipline and this order is entirely part of the Torah itself. And therefore, when one feels that he is being restricted because he has to keep to a certain order, and after all, as I said before, he is an adult, if he would reflect that this restriction, this limited time during which the way things are organized, each one of these moments is representative of the whole. In other words, he is not being restricted just for the sake of being restricted. By this restriction, he is now learning, not just learning this time, this moment, and in this sefer. He is learning in a yeshiva. He is learning in an edifice that has an overall purpose and meaning. And thereby he connects himself to this total edifice. And thereby he becomes part of the total union of the effort of learning Torah. It's not just an isolated action. It is an action that is connected to an overall effort of learning Torah. And as a matter of fact, because Eden are spread out throughout the whole world, on all continents. And the world has every denomination of time at all times possible. In the world, at all times, there is summer, there is winter, there is midday, there is midnight, there is morning, there is evening. Every denomination of time and change of seasons exists in the world at all times. Thereby, when we learn Torah here, and our Australian brothers are learning Torah there, what happens is that we fill the world, the whole world, with Torah at all times. If we are going to change around, we are going to learn at night. So then, who knows, maybe that moment that we are supposed to fill in the whole world of learning Torah is missing, because we decided to change the order of things. By the way, maybe it's late.
A little bit Muslim?
I want to point out an interesting thing, since I mentioned this Indian, that the world has every denomination of time. It's in Hayom Yom brought down, and Tzedek speaks about it, that the question of the earth being circular, and the people who are on one side of the globe, and then the people on the other side of the globe, and why the people who don't feel that they're walking upside down. Tzedek speaks about it. So, and Tzedek says that the real reason, this is not the time to discuss the whole question, but that's what he says. The real reason is because the earth has the shoyresh, is rooted in the ruchnius, in the lakus, in that which is called igulim. Igulim means circles. Just like a circle does not have a top and bottom. A circle doesn't have, it's a complete circle, there's no top and bottom. And that's why in the world, everything is top and everything is bottom. There's no top and bottom. There are no denominations in a circle. So if we think about it, how this expresses itself in the physical sense. The earth, Tzedek says, comes from Igulim, which is L'maylam. It's called L'maylam in Hamokim and L'maylam in Hazman. Being as such that it's L'maylam in Hamokim and L'maylam in Hazman, we see it physically, that on the earth as a whole, every type of time possible, every instant of time possible, which means 12:01, 12:02, 12:03, every instant of time possible, and every season, change of season possible, whether it's spring, fall, or winter, or summer, or any place in between, exists on the earth all the time. Only change is in seasons is in one place. In this place now it's winter, then someplace else it's summer. But on the earth as a whole, there's no change. It's always winter, it's always summer, it's always midnight, it's always midday. It's just an interesting insight, and this gives us also an insight of what we are participants in when we live an eternal life. We cannot review our lives as isolated what I do. We are part of an infinite activity. And the more we understand, the more we have revealed of that infinite perception. So that in reflecting this can uplift us from many from any laziness, so to speak, from any negativity, and say, this is not what I'm doing. I'm not just training myself to be a soldier and to be disciplined and then without a purpose, without a name. There's a real thing happening. It's a real thing happening, so then I'm going to put my real self into it. And then we have all the Hatzlach.